Let's please welcome back Director Matthew Heineman. As well, we have the producer of the film, Caitlin McNally, with us, and executive producer, Natasha Ahadi. So, welcome everyone. Great to have you with us. And this, I would like to be, a very fluid conversation between all of us here in this auditorium. We all share this experience. But I would like to ask the first question of all three of you, which is that as you watch this film, I can't help but think about the immense amount of physical danger that you were in as filmmakers putting this film together, and it's not probably what you imagined would happen when you started the film. I mean, it took you on a journey. Could you talk about those moments of physical danger and how you got through them? And in your introduction, you did mention this was the hardest film that you ever made, and we can certainly see why. But I'd love to hear about those moments of extreme danger.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, I don't know, think that I'm an adrenaline junkie or sort of get off on being in danger based on the films that I made, but that's certainly not the case. I mean, it's always about the story for me. It's always about this sort of goal to take these large amorphous subjects and to try to humanize them. And it just so happens that I've been put in danger, but like everyone, I have fear, and these films have had a big impact on me. I suffer from PTSD. I have nightmares. These are things that have massively impacted my life. But in those moments, sort of, I had two amazing cinematographers, Olivier Sarbel and Tim Grushka, who were shooting with me. That was me, like, as an example, me in the helicopter, shooting alone there, and in those moments, you have zero agency. I don't know how to fly a helicopter. I don't know how to shoot a gun. I know very little about military tactics. So all I can do is control my camera. Mm-hmm. So in those very, very intense moments, I choose to sort of focus on what I can control: aperture, making sure the record button's on, focus, framing, and that sort of calms me down in those very, high intensity situations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for you, Caitlin and Baktash, what were you going through as producers, and watching all of this unfold?
So I think when Matt and Tim Grusha, who's in the audience right here, one of our amazing, amazing cinematographers, when they went back to film in Kabul after Kabul fell to the Taliban, of all the years I've spent producing, of all the films I've worked on, I've never been so scared and so worried about friends and colleagues. That was a really, really chaotic, unpredictable time. But I think our team believed really deeply that it was necessary to get back there, to obviously document the denouement of this sort of journey that we've been so privileged to be on with the Green Berets, with General Sadat. But it was really scary. It was also scary. I mean, we talk about danger. When I was there in Afghanistan, I think for me, I'm a mother, and I think I thought a lot about that, about the fact of being there while also having children back at home. Mm-hmm. But I think that when we realized that we had such intimate access to people who were living through some of the most extreme circumstances a human can live through, we really felt a duty to keep going. And then obviously from the producing side, we did our very best to make sure that there were plan A and B and C and safety plans and all of that. But I think, as Matt says, it's a risk and reward, and you have to negotiate it every single day. And on this one, there were some scary days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So as a producer, executive producer, I was very much doing a lot of the work from my home, behind the screen of my computer and on the telephone. Matt and the other cameramen were out there. I think maybe the perspective I'd like to share is that as an Afghan American who had served with the Marines as a combat interpreter for 3 years, what was really interesting about this film, which was very personal to me as well, as somebody who's in some sense lived this experience, was having to go through the footage and watch it over and over again. So I was part of the team that was responsible for the cultural and linguistic understanding of this whole process. And what's interesting about that is we had to go through the thousands of hours of footage and really share what was important. And what's really curious about that experience is the moral injury that you go through and the PTSD that reemerges as you go through this footage. You know, as somebody who is Afghan, and there are Afghans in this audience, I can see you right now. Salam barisa barakulatan. And so this never ends for you. This never ends for us. This was just a moment in time that was captured. But if you talk to Afghans in the audience, every last one of us are getting messages to this day asking for help, from friends and family that we know that are still in Afghanistan, saying, please get us out. Help us. And I'd be remiss to say that, you know, if this film does anything for all of you, we are in Manhattan. We are very close to the World Trade Center, the place in which Al-Qaeda attacked some 20 years ago. So if this film represents anything and teaches you anything, it's that what happens in Afghanistan very much affects what happens here. And so every time I watch this film, Matt and Caitlin, I get deeply emotional, especially at the very end. It is heart-wrenching. It is very difficult. So that's the perspective I'd like to share.
Thank you. Put up your hand if you have a question. If you have a question for our filmmakers. Yes, right over here.
Not yet.
Do you have any connections you can help there? Or
Got
solicit?
an email address? We can send him a screener.
I'll give a relatively short version of a very long answer. So in mid-August, we were sort of debating about going back to film with General Sadat. Experts, pundits were saying sort of 2-3 months, maybe up to 6 months, the war would continue. We had no idea, really. But by the time we got to Dubai and started to fly, we're getting ready to fly into Kabul, things started to fall really rapidly. And when we took off on that flight, we descended into the valley of Kabul, and the pilot got on the intercom and said, you know, we can't land, there's a plane on the tarmac. We were so low that all of our phones started to ping, 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 ping. And we were getting text messages, news alerts, that the Taliban had taken over Kabul, and that plane on the tarmac was President Ghani fleeing. And we weren't able to land. And we felt like it was the greatest journalistic failure of our entire career. We'd spent 8 months building this story to this moment, and we were sitting in an airport hotel in Dubai as this all was unfolding, as our main protagonist, as our main participant was in the center of this, on this tragic, historic day. And so we spent every waking hour after that trying to get back into Kabul, which we did several days later. By that time, General Sadat had been forced to flee based on the danger he was in. And so, similar to when the Green Berets left, we were forced with this question: what is this film? What is the story we're telling? We're not news. You know, I'm not like filing a report back to home base or anything. And so, you know, with every door that closes, a door opens. With every failure comes an opportunity. And the opportunity here was to open up the aperture of the storytelling to show the civilians that the Green Berets were fighting for, that the Afghan army was fighting for, and the civilians that are so often the ones obviously most affected by these wars. And so, you know, it really allowed us to, create a whole new narrative and obviously a final chapter to this saga. And I think when we landed, sorry, it's a long answer to the question, but basically when we landed in Kabul, we made a decision to leave the wire, to leave the airport. not knowing whether we'd be able to come back, not knowing whether we'd be able to get on a plane and leave. And one of the first things that we heard about was this Taliban meeting. And I wish it was a sort of sexier answer, but all we did was basically walked up to the meeting and knocked on their door and asked if we could film, and they said yes. So that's essentially what happened. And it was obviously very, 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 very surreal, spending, my entire sort of conscious adult life hearing about the Taliban, the previous months, getting shot at by the Taliban, rockets shot at us by the Taliban, and being on stage with them was very surreal, obviously.
I'd also love to mention, you asked about access, and way before that happened, we had to get access to the Green Berets, right, which was not an easy thing to do because they're not a community that traditionally wants to open their doors to media. We actually have a colonel, a Green Beret commander in the audience right now, who was a great, great champion of this film and a guide along the way. But we had to gain the trust of that community, which was not easy. Took time, like anything. A relationship built on trust, you have to renegotiate every single day. I'm sure my friend Colonel Moses in the audience could tell us about how many times he'd say, "This is actually a horrible idea. Don't try it." But yeah, I think it's trust. It's a bit of boldness, of course, but also trust that you continue to you continue to be in conversation with as you proceed over something that takes as long as this film took.
Okay, right here.
Everyone can hear the question? Yeah. Is it about the...
Did you all hear the question? Yeah, okay.
At the airport or in Lashkar or just in general? In the edit room, okay. I mean, I think, again, there's a 6-hour answer to that question, but the 20-second version is, I think what we try to do with these films is put you on the ground in those rooms, in those helicopters, in those hospitals. My goal is always to make you feel like you're there, make you feel like what it would be like to be General Sadat or one of his men or one of the civilians trying to flee. What if that was you? What if that was your sister, your brother, your cousin, or your mother? And create this empathetic connection between between the film and the audience. And in doing so, hopefully, making the world just a little bit smaller, making the world have a little bit more empathy and care and love. Because it's so easy to keep these conflicts like really at arm's length and so distant. And it's so easy to, change the channel metaphorically or change the radio. And I think I think our goal is to try to make you feel just a little bit, and hopefully this stays with you a little bit longer. And certainly this story in the story of Afghanistan is no longer, talked about that often. I mean, when's the last time you had a conversation about Afghanistan, unless you're obviously Afghan or care about this issue? Ukraine has really usurped the international sort of oxygen in the news. And so one of the many things we hope is that this film sort of reinvigorates a conversation about this country that we left behind.
And then really quickly, you talked about editing. We also just had amazing editors on the film, including one of them who's here tonight, Grace Zara.
Another question. Yes, sir, right here. Sure.
I'm using the microphone so everybody can hear. I apologize. I'm Brad Moses that she made reference to. First, I'd just like to thank National Geographic for keeping the apolitical stance that you guys are so good at doing. Right, I've got a relationship with you from 2016, 17 in North Africa, and it really does help to tell a story and not politicize it. To my Afghan brothers in the room, Degaz de Maidan, I don't think it's over yet over there. I spent 70 months of my life in the country, and I was there just before this filming, and true, Caitlin was told by the 4-star, you cannot come into country. National Geographic was told you cannot come into country. And so they did it, and they carried the water very well. But What it doesn't depict, that I don't think the audience captures, which is fine, it's not necessary for what you tried to accomplish, but there's 39 other nations that were part of that closure in Afghanistan, underneath the coalition. If you have your so what out of this film, what would that be? And would it be to share with the international audience that did not participate in the retrograde of forces to include our Afghan partners out of the country? That would kind of be my hope, but I would ask, so what at the end of this film? If you had your way, what would be the takeaway for an international audience on the heels of this film? Other than the one gentleman in the back, I'd like to have the current administration see the film as well.
Thank you. I mean, thank you, Brad, for the question. I think we all share, and I think Matt articulated this. We hope many things for this film, and as Matt said, we hope it just keeps recognition of the fact that, and also as Bakhtash said, that there are still Afghans in danger in Afghanistan because they worked with Americans and the NATO coalition for 20 years, who are still in danger, who still need help. We also have Green Berets in the crowd who are continuing every day to help those Afghan partners who need assistance. But I think one thing that I very much hope is taken away from this film is a sense of what your Green Berets and what General Sadat and his men so graciously allowed us to see, which is there can be intense, important human bond in the most extreme circumstances, in the midst of conflict, in the midst of war. And most of the audience, I'm going to assume, not all the audience, but most of the audience has not gone through that experience of war. And I hope that we captured something in the film about the human bond that can occur, that occurred between your Green Berets and Afghan partners, that occurred between General Sadat and his men. I hope that's taken away.
I'd like to say something too. I think that's right. The other piece is, this was America's longest war. So everybody in this room has somebody that they know that has probably served in this war. Friend, husband, wife, cousin, neighbor. And so what's really curious is that at the end, it depicts that something like 6,300 American lives were lost in this battle, in this war. And something that I want all of you to kind of think about is more lives are killed in the United States of people who have served in Afghanistan and Iraq than have actually died in theater. More people have committed suicide in this country, service members that have actually died in Afghanistan and Iraq. I want you to really think about that. So Afghans, we suffer. It's part of our identity in some sense. But what's really curious is also Americans, those that have served, they are also suffering. And we as a nation, we as a country, we as a society have to ask the question, is it them that have the problem, or is it us that is not able to receive them? Right? What is it about us as a society that actually allows for this to happen? And I ask this of all of you. What will you do of a person that you know that has served? How will you engage them? What will you ask them? And this is an opportunity for you to say, I saw this movie, oh my gosh, can you tell me what it was like to be in Afghanistan? My sense is most people are kind of scared to even ask the question. But anybody that has served will want to tell you what their experience was like. And so that's the one thing I want for everybody to kind of take away as well.
All right, we have time for one more. Huh? We don't.
We'll be outside if anyone wants to talk to us.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
Thank you.